My name is Jackie. I am your event host this evening along with Kayla. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Sarah. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction before we get started. So here to discuss her debut novel, Momfluenced, Sarah dives deep into not only the worlds of influencers, but also of the influenced. Me in a very approachable and conversational way. Described by Joe Piazza, creator of the Under the Influence podcast. Reading Momfluenced is like having a frank conversation about motherhood, gender, and capitalism with someone much smarter, wittier, and well-read than I am. So Sarah, right here. We will have a time for Q&A at the end. And we also will have a signing line. So if you'd like to have your books personalized, Sarah will do that after the event. If you haven't gotten to get your copy yet, we have them available at the register as well. So we encourage you to do that if you haven't already. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're excited to hear this, so I will turn over to you.
Oh, thank you for coming. Thanks. I'm going to start with like a nice, juicy, long reading. Just sort of, I feel like it taps into a lot of the themes we might want to talk about. So, 3.5 pages. Too long. Okay. My writing career did not sustain my family financially, and when the pandemic hit and schools closed, it took a backseat to childcare and housework. A babysitter comes 4 mornings a week to help with my toddler now, but during lockdown, I eked out paltry writing and editing hours during naps and early in the morning. The effort of sustaining the illusion that I could think critically and turn that thinking into writing while being used up by the demands of domestic life was exhausting. On the days I tried to protect my writing time, the counters were sticky and the kids' hair unbrushed. Whatever writing I did was in small, unsatisfying chunks and felt stilted and superficial. I would fall asleep certain I tried to do everything and achieved nothing. Amanda Waters writes frequently about how home nurtures her creative spirit. In an Instagram post of pink tulips in a cream-colored jug and a record player on a simple plain table, the caption describes folding laundry in a podcast in which Elizabeth Gilbert defines the creative impulse as, quote, making something more beautiful than it has to be. Waters writes, quote, right then I stopped folding and my soul perked up and was like, yes, girl, yes. That's exactly how I see homemaking, doing those few extra details that really leave you feeling comforted and alive and grateful and safe and warm. Considering how we make our homes, especially now that we're all staying home, as we all should, invites us to take the time to fold this sentiment into the work we do there. It's work that's important and valuable. It's also deeply personal, as it is life-giving when things feel rather bleak or hopeless. I challenge you this weekend to do something to make your home, the place that nurtures you, more beautiful than it has to be. Yesterday, the kids and I made sun prints and we hung them around the house this morning. What joy! Feel free to share your beauties below, end quote. In 2020, I read this in the bathroom, feeling bleak as hell. While my husband was wrangling the kids for bedtime, I heard a dull whack in the distance, the sound of a kid falling, and my body tensed. My daughter burst in. Mom, Sai's crying and he wants milk. I sighed and cursed under my breath that I can't even remove my menstrual cup in peace. I wanted so badly to do work that is, quote, important and valuable, but this didn't feel like that. I kissed my baby's head bonk and nursed him, his hiccupy sobs slowing into the steady rise and fall of his chest against my own, and I resolved to live the next day in the spirit of at Mama Waters, to go all in, because seething in bathrooms wasn't working. When I woke up at 6:43 a.m., I lit a candle. When I got dressed, I chose my fake vintage Levi's, even though they're not comfortable when I sit down, and a sweater that looks hand knit. I smeared organic face oil onto my face and called it a calming ritual. I stuck to some semblance of a homeschool schedule, Googled magnetile activities, took meat out of the freezer at noon, and wiped the counters after every meal. Laundry was sorted, started, dried, folded, put away. We made potato prints, but my daughter painted hers over with garish neon pink glitter, and my son made a cartoony cat. Both of them fucked with negative space in uncool ways. The only print that made it to Instagram was mine, which featured minimalist arcs. I felt a little guilty for not showcasing my kids' ugly art, but mostly I felt angry at myself for placing value on their art in the first place and treating it like a reflection of my motherhood. Instagram makes it easy to believe that beauty is part and parcel of the work of mothering. If you're not trying to make it pretty, what's the point? Somehow the baby stepped in ink and the resultant mess set back dinner prep, which made the kids hangry, which made me yell. By the time my husband emerged from our home office, I hated him for his uninterrupted workout there. I thought of at Mama Waters and, willing myself to find a way to make my space, quote, more beautiful than it has to be, stooped down to pick up Polly Pocket's tiny plastic chair. I hated that tiny plastic chair too. It was 27 minutes past bedtime, and I could hear one of my kids having a fit because her favorite PJ bottoms were in the wash. I felt an overpowering urge to get in the car and just drive. I was too consumed with my own rage at the time, but reading this now while 2 of my kids are at school and the others at a petting zoo with a babysitter, I can see myself in my mother as she careens out of the driveway, cigarette smoke trailing, desperate to escape. I'm capable of creating beauty. I'm capable of hiding plastic toys away in bins and endlessly wiping down countertops. But I can't see past the mind-numbing work that goes into it. And the monotony of that work doesn't often equate to the momentary feeling of calm produced by neatness and order. The bud vase of violets will only be pretty if the streaks of toothpaste have been scrubbed from the sink. If the dark yellow urine spots sprinkled across the toilet seat by a first grader with poor aim have been scoured. And if I take a picture, then what? Who will see the fruits of my labor if I don't post it on Instagram? If I don't, or even if I do, who will care? And even if someone does care in a passing, oh, that's pretty type of way, how will that translate into me having a better / easier / prettier experience of motherhood? If anything, won't my bud vase of violets just make them remember their own toothpaste streaks getting in the way of something better? Amanda Waters recently opened a home goods shop called Home Song Market, where she sells vintage copper measuring cups, hand-painted wooden toys, and an implausibly beautiful laundry basket. The basket, made of, quote, 100% organic, naturally harvested reed, is marketed on the website as being able to fit one, quote, very large load of laundry. I know this is true because I bought one. I'd been lugging our laundry from the dryer to my bed using a ratty old laundry bag I must have had since college, and the process was not sparking any joy. When the pale blonde basket arrived in the mail, I was delighted to discover that it was both incredibly light and sturdy. It was accompanied by a handwritten note signed by Amanda. I can't remember what it said, but it was warm. I don't really believe that I'm a bad mother. I don't believe there's anything so simple as a good mother or a bad mother. I know an argument could be made that the time it takes to craft idealized images of one's house and children for the consumption of strangers in order to maintain a lifestyle brand would be better spent engaging with those children IRL. An argument could also be made that at Mama Waters and other Instagram mother artisans are getting far more out of motherhood than I am, so good for them. Sometimes I throw the laundry basket against my hip and imagine myself existing within a neat square frame, wearing some sort of nap dress instead of old American Eagle sweatpants. And in this way, the basket allows me to envision myself as someone else, as a different mother made happier and better by different things. One who can coax her children into gingham frocks and prevent them from blowing out the candle that's casting golden light onto an empty wood table. Sometimes I choose to believe in the laundry basket. I choose to believe in the inherent goodness and beauty. So that's my little reading. I guess I chose that because this book really stemmed from my own experience of navigating momfluencer culture, of latching on to mothers that I perceived to be succeeding in ways that I was failing. I don't know, did any of you follow Naomi Davis back in the day? Love Taza? No? Gosh. So she's an OG. She had like one of the mommy blogs back before Instagram was everything. And she lived in the Upper West Side with her 3 kids. Everything was very bright, colorful, well lit. And she made motherhood look like an adventure, look joyful, look easy, look natural. And she was sort of everything that I think I had been culturally conditioned to think that I should be, or should at least want to be. And even though intellectually I understood that motherhood was and is difficult and is a grind of doing, I also was raised to believe that motherhood should be this thing that completed me and that fulfilled me completely. And she seemed to have that. And so, yeah, basically my fascination with this started from my own conflicted feelings of like, I know this isn't their real life. I know this is just one slice. I know this is orchestrated for consumption, but I also want it. And yeah, so that led me to, does anyone follow Ballerina Farm? Anna Neeleman, Ballerina Farm? Oh my gosh. Okay. So that led me to her, and I had lots of feelings about her. She's also in the book, but yeah, for anyone that doesn't know her, she has 7 kids now. I think she has 7. I think she has 7. It's a lot. It's like I think it's 7. She's Mormon. Naomi Davis was also Mormon. That's like a thread you can see throughout this culture. There's like reasons behind that, but yeah, she has 7 kids. She lives on a like plus 100-acre ranch in Utah, and her whole vibe is like back to basics, like homesteading. But her husband is the son of the guy that created JetBlue. That's not part of the narrative.
Love that detail.
Right. So it's all just very like, we're homesteaders, we're living off the earth, but we come from immense generational wealth and privilege. And I don't know, I started following her mostly because I was just like, 7 kids, how? And like, how are you smiling and happy? Like, I just,
Clean.
I just like couldn't wrap my head around it. But she's a really interesting case study just because if you look at all the comments on her posts, it's always just like, you're such a good mom, you're a super mom, how do you do it all? And I think that's really indicative of what our culture values for mothers, which is A, that they do it all, B, that they're happy doing it all, and C, that it supposedly comes naturally to them. I don't know how I got into that tangent, just my own personal momfluencer obsession. But yeah, I don't know if you guys wanna start with questions, and then I can like follow threads, or I can just keep talking about like how the book came to be, or I'm totally open to what you guys wanna chat about. If anybody has any questions, or I can just talk about the book more.
I have a question, did you communicate with any of the followers that sparked some of this for you?
Like the actual momfluencers?
Sorry.
Yeah. So I interviewed several, I don't know, at least like 20, 30. I reached out several times to Hannah from Ballerina Farm, did not happen. Same with Naomi Davis. Yeah, I reached out to almost everyone I wrote about. And many of them did contribute, and their insights were really fascinating because I think a common misconception about this culture is that like they just take a few pretty pictures and the money comes rolling in. And that's really not the case. We were kind of talking about MLMs briefly. Brooke Aaron Duffy wrote a book called Not Getting Paid to Do What You Love. And she's an academic and studied influencer culture across the board and found that only 9% make enough to live on. I interviewed one momfluencer who has like 100,000 followers, and she said maybe if she never stopped working, she could make 20 grand a year.
Whoa.
So it's like the tippy top momfluencers can make serious money with like Amazon partnerships and stuff like that, but the vast majority do not make a ton of money. Which I don't know, I think is also interesting to consider, like, why are people doing it? Like, what is it giving them aside from financial security? And I dig into sort of, I have a whole chapter on whiteness and, how white supremacy is sort of undergirding a lot of this. And many of those moms that are peddling like QAnon conspiracy theories or, anti-vax, anti-mask, I do think there's more vulnerability for moms being sucked into that because mothers are so culturally disrespected in this country and so disenfranchised. I always think of like if you're at a dinner party and you're going around like, what do you do? What do you do? And if somebody says like, I'm a stay-at-home mom, like that's the end of the conversation. Nobody's like, oh wow, like tell me more about that. And we like have Mother's Day where we give moms like breakfast in bed and call it a day.
Yeah.
And we don't pay for their leave after childbirth. We don't, help them with accessible, affordable childcare. Our children are getting killed in schools. So it's a really frustrating place to be a mother. And I think it makes sense that we want hope that there's easier and more enjoyable ways to be moms. And I do think momfluencer culture capitalizes on our hope for something better.
Yeah.
Because the systems are often not.
I have a question. I mean, so much of these traditional momfluencers are peddling like stay-at-home motherhood, but they're working.
Yeah.
And often they're working really hard.
Yeah.
And so how do they reconcile that? And I had working motherhood is a real interest of mine. And I had a friend say to me, all I see on Instagram are beautiful images of stay-at-home motherhood. And there's no one's posting images of their desk or them
Right.
pumping at work,
Right.
but these moms are working,
Yeah.
whether or not they're getting paid. And I don't know, I don't know if you would explore that or
Yeah.
how people make sense of that, like reconcile that within
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I always think of Phyllis Schlafly, who
Yes.
was, her whole platform was we need to go back in the home and be where mothers are supposed to be, and let the men lead. But she was a massive political figure and activist and was working outside the home. And yeah, a lot of these more traditional moms, like their bios will be like just a mom, or they're very much, there's a whole subset of anti-feminism, pro-femininity momfluencers who are like, it's my choice to be led, and it's my choice, so that makes me a feminist. And that gets really tricky. And also there's a lot of pushback against, these momfluencers should be spending time with their kids instead of like taking pictures and editing them. But it's like, okay, so what about all the moms that are like gone from the home 9 to 5? Should they also be with their kids? So I just think misogyny is baked into like every consideration of motherhood. And I also just think that the imagery of the mother in the home holds so much power over our cultural imaginations. Like if we all closed our eyes and imagined like, okay, perfect mom, where is she? She's at home. There was a Pew study or a poll, I can't remember, but I think the statistic was 46% of Americans think that children should be raised in a household where one parent is at home. And of course, that one parent is the mom. And that's absurd, 46%. Like obviously, there are not 46% of American households where one parent is in the home. So I just think that cultural ideal is so entrenched in how we view motherhood and who gets to be a good mom, who doesn't get to be a good mom. Yeah, I hope that sort of answered that question.
Yeah. Do they see themselves as working moms?
Some of them totally do. Yeah, some of them completely do. And some of them are, really using this as like a jumping off point to something else. Like maybe they are working in the arts or, photography. Maybe they're working, trying to write a children's cookbook or whatever. Like it's a means to an end often. No, I would say the vast majority of momfluencers whose accounts are monetized, like who have sponsorship deals with brands, do very much see themselves as, working outside the home because they are. They're writers, they're editors, they are photographers, they're designers, they are business people dealing with contracts. So yeah, and I think their work is really denigrated because they're women and because they're mothers.
I'm just curious that, so the 20,000 you said for the $100, $100,000.
Yeah.
Is that just, are you talking cash?
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't include like all the free stuff, okay?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And like, so the industry like started out with like mommy bloggers and they monetize their blogs through banner ads, which so like, you read their personal essay and on the side of the screen are just like ads posted. Like the companies just send them the ad and they don't do anything in terms of creating the ad. And then slowly brands started to realize that these people had like massive audiences. So they would send them free stuff in exchange for product reviews. And then of course, momfluencers were like I'm doing free labor, like I need to be paid for this, like I'm doing advertising and marketing for you. And then, now they're being paid to post the product reviews or to run, sponsored content or like 2 Instagram stories talking about fountain paper towels or whatever. So they definitely get free stuff still, but yeah,
But it doesn't feel free.
right,
Because I think I've
totally.
been saying like, they have to come up with the idea for the
Yeah.
ad to make it look
Yep.
like it's within their aesthetic
Yep.
and like their vibe and everything.
Mhm.
That's like a whole other profession.
100%. Yeah, it's marketing and advertising and consumer research.
Yeah.
Like it's all of those things. For sure.
It feels like reality TV, sort of. Like I can see how, I don't really watch TV as much because of parenting, but I'm always on my phone, But I also like, I just love when they crack and are like, they can't keep it up anymore. I think that's like a sickness inside of a mom that's like, show me what's real kind of thing, but that's like a very embarrassing, shitty feeling too. Like, you almost want to see them fail or crack, or does that
Yeah.
happen too? Like, what happens if someone gets divorced, or what happens if they lose their money, or the husband loses a job or something?
I mean, it's so dark because
Yeah.
they are also acutely aware that, vulnerability
Yeah.
sells.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they like package it, like they,
Well, okay, so like, say you go through a divorce, for example.
yeah.
And say you decide to share about it with your, 200,000 followers or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And then you
But-
see like a
yeah.
massive uptick in engagement in your
Mhm.
follower count. And then brands notice you have more engagement in follower
Okay.
count, so they offer you more money. Then if you are making a living off of this, it beholds you to be like, okay, guess
Like
I
that
gotta
with
post more
divorce
about
law.
my
Yeah.
crying,
Uh,
which is really fucking dark,
yeah, like, I found out like exploiting it for
Right.
money or whatever.
Yeah, I talked to one woman who, I don't think she had a manager at the time, but at one point during her career had been talking to potential managers. And they were like, yeah, like if you find yourself having a day and you're crying, you got to turn that camera on.
Mm,
And that's just,
It's
it's,
so sad.
it sucks. And I also understand why we as consumers are like, where is the crack in this veneer? And I think that has less to do with them
Yeah,
and even less to do with us and more to do with the culture at large,
Yeah.
expecting mothers to have it all together.
yeah,
Like, I feel like our desire for them to crack has more to do with our rage that we're expected not to crack
yeah,
than like these people as individuals.
mm,
I don't know.
yeah.
Did you explore at all like the effect that this has on kids?
Yeah, I'm so curious how it'll play out in the next decade.
No, there was a piece recently about like teenagers coming out on TikTok about like their mother, mostly their mothers utilizing them in their momfluencing careers. I did not dig too deeply into that for this book, only because I thought that could be its own book. And I was more focused on like maternal identity rather
Mm.
than anything specifically involving kids. I definitely it comes up in the book, because so many of the momfluencers obviously have opinions about it. One of them that I interviewed, her kids' images were stolen, in role play where somebody creates a whole fake account.
God.
And obviously that gets into creepy places in terms of like pedophilia and shit like that. And many of them were like, my kids are not going on social media until they're 18, like 100% no. So like, I think most of them are acutely aware that this is like, can be a very psychologically dangerous path to walk, both as consumers and content creators. I talked to another mom whose kid, like she was very upfront with what she did and that she got paid for these things. And that if he ever didn't want to do it, he didn't have to. And one day he was like, yep, don't want to do it. And that was that. And so he's not, on her account anymore. I don't know. I do think it's sort of impossible for a kid to give clear consent. A 3-year-old cannot meaningfully understand what their presence online will look like and feel like to them as adults. Like they just can't. In the same way, I was thinking recently of like kid actors. Like they can't really consent to that either, but that's happening. Yeah, I just think children's consent in general, in terms of their likenesses being used in any sort of monetization in any sort of media is really tricky.
They almost like
Yeah.
create a character, like
Right,
in that way, like your child becomes the character
right,
of your story,
right,
right? And so if that character isn't who they really are,
right,
and you know, because you can spin it to make it look however you want, and you can dress them up in like a linen outfit, and
Right.
then they rip it off
right.
20 seconds later, and that's like not who they are, and they want to wear a dinosaur shirt. Like,
Yep.
you're not accurately portraying who they are, like as a person. And like,
Mhm.
how's that gonna look for them when they get older and they can look back on that and be like, you didn't like me the way I was? Like, I feel like there's this kind of, you know, and I'm a teacher right now, and I'm like, it's interesting to see how that affects kids and like what their parents' perception of them is.
Yeah.
But like my mom wants me to be
Yeah.
this, but like I'm not.
Mhm.
So that part is really interesting too.
Mhm.
Because I look at my own kids and like I have an Instagram and I post my kids, and I was like saying earlier, I'm like, you know, most of my pictures are blue, like shades of blue. So I'm like, my son's favorite color is red. Like, this is annoying to me. Like,
Right.
you know, like he's out there in a red coat on the beach. Like, you know, that is not gonna go with my vibe. I'm like, I don't really care. I have like 100 followers. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
Right.
But at the same time, like it's something that pops into my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what an ugly thought.
Right.
That I'm like, I should get him a blue coat. I'm like, should I? Like, so I feel like there's this like, you know, you're creating this like little character
Yeah.
that isn't always who they are.
Yeah. And even just like, I don't know, that's why I think this is so important to dissect, because like you were saying, like it has crept into your expectations of how you represent your own motherhood, even though you only have like 100 or whatever followers.
And
Like-
he doesn't care.
Right. Totally.
You know?
Right. But we have become so habituated to performing ourselves and in branding ourselves. Again, even if it serves no clear financial, you know, imperative. And yeah.
There's a part too that like finding the art in the pictures of your day is like a way to also be like using your brain as a mom.
Yeah.
So like I really related to that too, but I remember the other day, this is my friend, I posted about like the fish's grave we made, and then I took it down because I was like, am I just trying to show off like that I
You did a grief ritual.
that I can write my kids for the fish that we never named? I just, but it's like but I was like the stones, you know,
Yeah.
they're so good. It's just like it's tricky because you're like, oh, this is nice, and then you're also like, what am I doing? Yeah.
No, because I do think there's something to be said for like taking stock of our days
Yeah,
and
right.
like locating meaning.
Yeah, right.
Like I don't think that's bad at
But
all.
then it's also the performative line. It's such a line.
I know. I know.
It's like a creative outlet.
Right,
Right.
yeah,
And, like,
yeah.
I think that's where like the influencers kind of start from, right? Is somebody who's good at taking pictures and is like, well, other people might like the way that looks. And they're creative and they have that eye for like, you know, setting up the composition of the photo and stuff. So maybe it like starts as a creative outlet, and then
Yeah.
once people like it, like steamrolls, and then
Right.
Also, like being a parent can be so isolating, especially being a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah.
So like finding that way to connect with people and
Yeah.
like you said, engaging your brain in a different way. It's
Yeah.
not just focused on parenting, it's focused on something
Right.
outside of that.
I think that's for sure. It's feedback too. Like I think like
Yes.
Oh, yes.
feedback from either the project you're doing, there's like inherent feedback, or from your boss. And like if you're like, I don't know, I think about I'm so glad you shared that passage about you during COVID. Early COVID was such a dark time, right? And like not only was I like posting pictures of my own art, but I'm like fixing my kids' art, like adding shit to it. Good enough, I was making it prettier. Like it's so embarrassing, but it's like I wanted, like, I don't know, I guess there was a part of me that like craved some sort of feedback, because there's no immediate feedback with little kids, right? Like my son's not like, great job. Like you don't do it online. It's some sort of like affirmation or feedback.
totally. Well, and COVID just like took us and pushed us right over the edge in terms of social media, especially as like
stay-at-home parents or new parents, like
Mhm.
I was a new mom, like I had a baby during COVID. And so like, that was like my life, right?
Yeah.
Like my home, my beautiful little nooks and crannies were like my whole life
Yeah.
with my newborn. And so you do try to find like joy and peace in
Right.
like those little quiet moments and like pretty little things around your house.
Yeah,
And try to like share it with the world because nobody's coming over.
right. Yeah. No, and just like our labor is mostly invisible.
Yeah.
And there's no like 40 under 40 lists for moms. Like, it's just so, we're told it's the most important job in the world, but like, we also live in capitalism and our value is equated to how much money we make. So like, that doesn't add up. Like, the math just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think no matter, if you're working inside the home or outside the home or both, like, being a mother in America is just fucking fraud. And, like, impossible.
So then to see it play out beautifully,
it's this, like,
it's
noble
what?
thing.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, that's the frustrating part. It's like, it must be possible, like this, I
Right.
see that these people are doing, it must be possible. I know I'm smart,
Yep.
I have a critical eye, I know that this is all smoke and mirrors, but it's gotta be sort of possible, you
Yeah.
know? Oh.
I think it'll be so interesting too to see generationally how this changes, because I think Gen Xers and millennials, who are predominantly the mothers in the culture right now, were raised in a particular way and have a level of perfectionism and ideals that are different than obviously younger generations. And when like Gen Zers become mothers and they're already into posting like imperfection, right? That's like part
Yeah.
of their shtick is
Yeah.
like everything doesn't have to be beautiful. Everything's not like, look at this is broken and this
Just
is
like the be
look at
real.
look at like
Yeah.
you just get half my ear and that's like the whole photo because
Yeah.
oops, I got my phone. And like I'm gonna post half of the world to see because that's real. Like, well, what is that gonna look like?
Yeah.
Right. And because I think that our generations like really crave the imperfections and want to see the brokenness.
Yeah.
They're like embracing brokenness already, but they're not parents yet.
Right.
Most, right? Most
Right.
of them. So yeah. But I think it would be so interesting. But they will also have been the children of influencers.
Mhm.
And it'll still be capitalism though, so it'll have to be a certain kind of
Yeah.
showing your weakness kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and it won't be,
Yeah, so,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
right,
but it'll be like, the technology will be that much further
Yeah.
along, like our parents had photo albums.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
yeah.
all they had to show for.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I was thinking about like your point about like, who am I showing this to? Why am I showing this? Like, we all have photo scrolls in our phone that we could always go back and look at. But I do think that sometimes of my social media account is like like an archive, like
Yeah.
something that I can go back and be like, oh, remember this time
Yeah.
that where I group a few photos from one particular event.
Yep.
That maybe I don't keep, or I certainly didn't print out anywhere, not
Right.
framing, like,
Right.
so it's like the place to go, but like that will also evolve and change.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Crazy.
I know.
Did you look at like mom culture in any other countries, or do you just focus on like the American mom influencer?
I did interview, she's not a momfluencer, but someone from the UK. She has a book. Gosh, I'm blanking on her account right now. Mama. I'll look it up. But her account is basically all like, it's very much like real motherhood, and it's mother artists taking photos of their own motherhood. So like you'll see like milk spurting out of a nipple. You'll see like a close up of a kid like drool or whatever. You'll see like a messy table with cereal spilled on the, whatever, but it's like beautiful. Like all the images are super real, but also sort of like fantastic. But we were talking about like the differences between American ideals of motherhood and UK ideals. And she was like, the momfluencer there is very much like bright colors, profane, drink beer at the pubs. And I think it's less precious and less like green juicy than the American example. And I also, I forget which Scandinavian country, of course, it's Scandinavian country, but they have laws in place to protect children of influencers. So it's like very
Wow.
black and white, like, yeah, they'll have to put X amount of money into a college fund or, you know, the kid's own financial fund. It's very clear. And I know there is the movement in terms of US adopting something to protect kids. Yeah.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What was your favorite part about writing the book?
I was obsessed with discovering Lauren Berland. She's a literary critic and theorist, or was, and actually they. Their pronouns are they. And they came up with this thing called cruel optimism, which basically explores what it means to chase after an ideal, even if that ideal is explicitly or implicitly counterintuitive to one's thriving. And that really opened up how, you know, my own experience of chasing a certain ideal of motherhood played out in my own life, and also led me to sort of really deeply explore where these ideals are coming from. And often they're coming from white men in power that want to hold on to power and to marginalize and harm people not in power. And really becoming clear on where these ideals come from can be so freeing, because then the ludicrousy of trying to attain the ideals becomes clear. Yeah, so I really love digging into like the cult of domesticity in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and how, you know, white upper class mothers were upheld as the angels of the house and at the moral center of the house, at the expense of every other type of mother. You know, enslaved mothers could not be good mothers or good women because they were regularly sexually assaulted and raped. So they couldn't be modest and chaste, which was one of the tenets of good motherhood. Mothers working outside of the home could not be good mothers or women because it was unseemly to work outside of the home and they were supposed to be ensconced within the domestic sphere. So yeah, and even, you know, researching some of the policies impacting mothers in this country and how particularly Black mothers have been systematically marginalized. Yeah, the ideal just stops being alluring when you see where it comes from.
Do you think more people are kind of moving towards that? Like, is there a tide that's turning towards that?
It's so hard because we're all in our own little like echo
Yeah.
chambers. I think so. Like, I think post-pandemic, so many of us are just like, fuck this. Fuck this. And so I think like there's a huge contingency of progressive mothers very much becoming vocal about things impacting our kids' lives and impacting our lives. And I think along with that is that backlash we see from like trad momfluencers who are saying that traditional ways of life and the nuclear family are under attack. But I think that kind of indicates that the rising tide of mothers really fed up is a real thing, because whenever something is deemed a threat, there's going to be backlash.
Yeah.
You know, it's like hopeful anyway.
Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with, I know you studied literature in the past, and how that study kind of, how you interacted with this material and how that might have been part of your research process?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did a master's program in literature back in the day. And I think just that allowed me to sort of interact with text in meaningful ways that I had no practice doing beforehand. And I think just kind of gave me the confidence to cobble together my own ideas on the backs of others. Yeah, so yeah, I think that was really critical in shaping how I wrote the book and incorporated sources for sure.
Can you share some of, like, I remember some parts of you talking about your own mom and your like vision of your childhood versus maybe her experience of it, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like almost every mom I know in my generation has a greater or clearer understanding of her mother once she becomes a mother.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know until you do it. And then you're like, oh, maybe that's why she was always pissed off before we went on vacation. Like, oh, like, I get it. Because I don't know, it's this very humbling experience of finding yourself like moving through motions that feel frighteningly familiar, and it's because you're your own mother. Like, you're mirroring your own mother.
Yeah.
And I just have a ton of empathy for moms in that generation. You know, who were very much, of course, you know, it was the 80s and 90s. So there was like, you know, the shoulder pad moms and, you know, be a man to get ahead of work, but also do everything at home.
Yeah.
And my mom didn't work outside the home. She was a stay-at-home mom, as were all of my aunts. So I really grew up with that model as being like, this is what you do. And I didn't think critically about it at all. Which strikes me as sad. Like, I never thought, like, do I want to be a mom? Like, I never. I just like dove headlong into it. And I think that is certainly contributed to my existential crises following the birth of my first kid.
Mhm.
I had postpartum depression, but I also had just like intense disillusionment. Just because I thought, like, okay, once I become a mom, I will be a grown up. Like,
Yeah.
I will have done it. Like, I will have reached the pinnacle of what, you know, women are supposed to do, and
Yeah.
was wholly unprepared for the labor of mothering
Yeah.
that I had been chasing, just the ideal of, you know, I thought it would be like starring in my own movie.
Yeah.
Good question.
We would have time for one more question if someone has one.
I'm just curious, like, does the book end with like your advice, like? Avoid, like, look like you're like, is your like advice you just get off? Like, I've had periods in my life where I've gone off Instagram totally,
Yeah.
but then I like realized I was like not taking any photos. It's weird. But like, is that your like?
I mean, I totally fix everything for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. This is like, I don't have any universal advice, I guess. The one bit of universal advice I have is to constantly check in with yourself about how you're feeling when you consume certain types of content, and B, how it might be impacting your behavior outside of just consuming the content. Interviewed one psychiatrist who had a patient who came in and had been struggling with her kid's behavioral issues. That's like why she was in therapy. She's like, I took my kid to the blueberry patch. It was a nightmare. It was pure hell. Like, it ended disastrously. And the psychiatrist was like, why'd you go to blueberry patch? Like, do you like blueberry picking? Like, is that something you do? And she's like, no, but like everybody's doing it on Instagram. So like, that's what you do to be a good mom. And she was like, no, you don't have to do that. And so I just think it bleeds into our expectations, like pumpkin patches. Like, I didn't do that as a kid. Like, my mom didn't haul us to the pumpkin patch and take like a shitload of photos. But now that's like a thing. We all do pumpkin patch photos. Like, we all do holiday cards with our kids' photos. And like, we can opt out of any of that. Even it doesn't feel like we can because it's just everywhere, but we can. We don't have to do any of it. So I don't know. And I'm a big fan of social media breaks. I try to do it every time I go on vacation. Just like, I just feel so much better. It's just like, it's kind of upsetting how much better I feel. But yeah, just to constantly check in with yourself and be like, is this harming or adding? Is it harming me in ways that I might not even fully realize? Or is it, you know, educating me? Is it solving a problem that I had before going in?
Mm.
Or is it just like numbing me? I don't know. So just those constant like check-ins, I guess.
Mhm.
Also, yeah, totally.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Again, if you didn't get a copy of the book, it looks like most of you did. But if you didn't, we have some available at the register, and we'll have Sarah do a signing in here. So we're just gonna move her right over to this table.